Ken Wolf, Artistic Director of Manhattan Repertory Theater, and I'm here with Dave Silberger, who is an actor and a creative artist. I've worked with him before, and he's great. How are you doing, Dave?
Oh, I'm doing very well for a man in my condition, I would have to say.
Can you tell us a little about yourself and your work as an actor and creative artist?
Sure. So I'm an actor. I'm a comedian, as you could probably guess by that flippant answer that I gave just now. I perform. I've been performing at Ren Fairs with a national touring act called the Sturdy Beggars Mud Show since 1980, and that's about as close to being on a vaudeville circuit as exists in the world nowadays. So that has a certain appeal for me. And yeah, that's it. I started out pretty much just being a comic actor, but eventually people insisted on casting me in non-comic roles. And there was a while where I wasn't getting cast in comic roles at all, which is like, that's actually what I'm really good at. So, but I really do think I've talked to other comedian friends of mine. I think it's true. If you can do comedy, because comedy is actually harder to do, and plus comedic timing is something you either have or you don't have. You really can't teach somebody to have comic timing. You could take somebody who has comic timing and is maybe a little unsure of themselves and get them on the path to being a better comic. But if you don't possess that innate ability in the first place, you can't get it. And really, and it's like, look, I'm no musician, but people are musicians. Why? They just have an innate ability for music. I don't. I could take a million music classes, try to learn an instrument. I never get anywhere with it because it's just not a talent that I possess. So,
can you tell us your origin story? Like, how'd you get into acting? How'd you get into comedy? How'd you get into these festivals?
Wow. Well, I don't, that's a tough, really, I don't know, there is an origin story necessarily. It's just always the sort of stuff I was interested in. I remember when I was very young, one of the first things I ever did is I wrote a story for my mother called The Five Spies. It was like stick figure drawings and a little narration because I was probably 6 or 7, so obviously couldn't write very sophisticated. And I sometimes think about that story because in some ways it's still like the plot of so much genre stuff. Because basically there was like these 5 spies who were going out on a mission, and then like 2 of them disappear. So the other 3 go looking for the other 2, and then the other 2 show up. But I'm thinking about things like Walking Dead, where they constantly take their large cast and they split them into groups, and they send this group here and this group here and this group here, and then eventually in the grand finale of the series they all come back together again. So I was writing that script when I was 6 years old. But then I had a bunch of friends. We used to sit around. This is when I was a middle schooler. We would sit around with a tape recorder, and first we would just do Monty Python and National Lampoon Radio Hour sketches verbatim. And then we started doing our own stuff, which was heavily influenced by that, obviously. The Marx Brothers were a big influence on me too. I used to dress up as Harpo for high school events just because. And that gets back to what I'm doing with the Ren Fairs. Again, very, very vaudeville, which, I can live my dream of being Harpo or one of the other Marx Brothers, whatever. So there really isn't an origin story per se. It's just something that I was always interested in and just pursuing and looking to do. I got into the fairs basically because my roommate, this was between the summer between my junior and senior years at Northwestern. My roommate had a contract to fulfill at a Renaissance Festival in Maryland, and he couldn't find anybody to do it, the show with him. So one day he just looked at me and our other roommate, Ken, and was like, "Hey, would you guys want to do this thing?" And we're like, "Well, I was wondering when you get around to asking, John." So that's kind of how I fell into that. And that's, it's kind of, in anything, it's like, I started working with you, and that led to more working with you and things like that. And, it's just, if you do a good job, people want to work with you again.
Can you tell us about your experience playing Groucho Marx in The Last Supper?
Well, yeah. So you cast me as Groucho in The Last Supper, and and that was, at first I was reluctant to do it because I'm a huge Marx Brother fan, as I've mentioned several times already, And I didn't want to do injustice to him. I didn't want it to be, a bad, weak ass version of Groucho, being nowhere close to what it ought to be. So for that reason, I was reluctant to do it. But then as I thought about it, I realized, well, the play is going to go on without me, and I'm going to come see it. I see somebody else doing a half-assed job of Groucho, I'm going to be annoyed. So I figured if anyone's going to do a half-assed job of playing Groucho, might as well be me. And I think that's a sentiment Groucho would get behind. So, and I got to say, when I put on the grease paint, I was stunned by how much I actually did look like him. And I think partially, being Jewish as well, I've got the nose for a start. So, you don't have to worry about that. So then it's just the mustache and the eyebrow thing. So, yeah. And that was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun. The play was, it was an interesting play. Let's just say that.
That's great. So what's the most fun experience you ever had on stage?
Oh, this is another one of these questions. It's like when you ask someone their favorite book or movie, depends whatever just pops into my head at that moment. I've had a lot of fun experiences. I would say just recently, I was doing a Renaissance fair in Bristol, and again, since it's like vaudeville, my partner Rush and I were honing a joke in live time in front of audiences. Because we do 4 shows a day. So the joke that we had been doing is I would find a reason to disqualify Rush because it didn't really look like Shakespeare enough, right? And we kept trying to find the way to a really better joke for it. And what we finally came up with was I would say, Billy, that there's a problem with your Buster Shakespeare. And say, what? I'd say, well, the nose is too short. And he'd say, well, the mud is too cold. And I say, well, be that as it may, the winner is, and I give the round to the other guy, right? And then we discovered that if you inject the word ways, if you say that nose is way too short, no, it's because the mud is way too cold. That got a bigger laugh than not putting the word way in there. Why? I don't know. It's a rhythm thing. Comedy is rhythm. But we worked that in real time because we wanted to change the joke that had been there. We did the early version of the joke at the first show. It got a okay laugh when we talked about it backstage. And it's like, maybe we can goose this up some more. And then we discovered that the word way is what does it. And again, to get back to the Marx Brothers, when they were doing Night at the Opera and Day at the Races, MGM actually paid for them to have a mini vaudeville tour up and down the West Coast to do material from the movie. And that's what they discovered, that like if they took a word out, put a different word in with the same meaning, or rearrange the word order of a sentence, it would have an effect on the effectiveness of the joke, And then they would have MGM executives in the audience with stopwatches timing how many seconds a laugh would get, so that they could have real quantitative evidence. It's like, no. When you tell the joke this way, it gets 2 seconds longer laugh than when you told the joke this way. So that's the way to go, that's really getting it down to a science. That's pretty incredible.
I love that.
But it's just fun because it's the creativity in real time. Now, I don't know if that counts as on stage because this was over the course of several shows that we worked that out. But when we nailed it and it stayed nailed, we were like, yeah. That's really good.
I love that. I just love that there are principles to comedy. There's principles to playwriting. There's principles to performance, and it never ceases not to fascinate me. It's just so interesting to me that there are ingredients to all of this. There's ingredients to art, which I absolutely love. So I have a question. How do you plan on using the Courtyard League platform?
Well, I guess I could see, if it's other artistic people on this site as well. So be a way to contact, and, I'll have my stuff here. So if, I don't know, maybe someone will have a project that they might think I could be useful for. So,
nice.
Yeah.
That sounds fun. Maybe you can do a mud show in England or something. You never know, right?
I don't think they'd be very happy about all our bad English accents.
Oh,
So.
yeah, yeah.
Well, it
Maybe,
was
I
very,
think.
I made friends with merchants at this last fair that I was doing in Bristol, who actually were British people. It was very funny too, because it was Al and Rob, but Al was short for Allison, and Rob was short for Robin. So it was a man and a woman, but but their names were gender confused because Allison liked to be called Al.
That's funny.
And Rob liked to be called Robin, which is a name that can go either way, but is usually thought of as a female name for the most usually. So and they were very funny. They were like our next door neighbors backstage, and they had a booth that was right across from our stage, and we talked with them in the morning, and they were they were very funny, very cynical, very British people. Really a lot of fun dealing with them.
That's great. So, in terms of your career, what's next for you? What's in store for Dave Silberger?
I finished my first leg of this year's Ren Fair tour, and this coming Labor Day weekend, I'll start Boston. So I do the fairs in Boston, and then I do fairs in Texas, and I'm hopeful that I'll be doing a project with your Manhattan rep sometime in early 2023. 2023. Wow.
Sounds good.
And other than that, just see what things come down the pike. You never know.
Yeah, and see how you can promote yourself on Courtyardly, because it reaches out to the world, and we love that. I love, that we're a global community, of artists. I think there's something really super cool about that, and good. But I want to thank you for getting on and doing this interview with me, and I hope to see you on stage soon. Okay. Okay. Thanks so much.